At 31st December 2008, over 500,000 people and organizations owed penalties totaling $790.2 million. Over 80% of these penalties are unpaid infringement that had been filed for enactment by the police, local authorities and other government agencies. The amount outstanding is increasing each year. Around 57% of the people with penalties owe less than $500. And many of those people can't afford to pay the penalties, but choose not to do so until an enforcement action is taken against them. Figures released earlier this year showed that between July 2008 and June 2009, courts wiped $95.1 million of the total $806 million in unpaid fines. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, both the amount of outstanding fines is increasing each year. The amount of unpaid fines that the courts have to wipe is also increasing. This bill seeks to address concerns about the amount of overdue fines, the dissatisfaction of victims when offenders do not comply with reparation orders, and the frustration of creditors and debtors using the court's civil debt enforcement process. Labour supports this bill. I acknowledge the great contribution made by the Honourable Rick Barker, who sits in the Speaker's chair. In fact, the bill, as acknowledged by my colleagues earlier, has resulted from work done by you, sir, while court minister in the Labour government. This is an omnibus bill which amends the District Courts Act 1947, the Land Transport Act 1998, the Sentencing Act 2002, and the Summary Proceedings Act 1957, and consequentially amends 16 other acts. The principal changes introduce 3 new sets of incentives to encourage people with overdue fines to enter into and maintain acceptable payment arrangements. The 3 sets of incentives are credit reporting, super priority, and driver license stop orders. The credit reporting initiative proposes the release of the overdue penalty balance of eligible people into the private sector credit industry via credit reporters. The district court will obtain a higher priority over secured property of a credit provider if the loan was advanced when the overdue penalties could have been released under the credit reporting proposal and when that property is subsequently seized by the court. Some or all of these discoverable penalties are still overdue. People were lending money to people to pay cars. The car lender were always assured of getting their money back. The law stops car dealers from hiding behind the law. When the money is lent, the lender can check a registrar and gives them grants to refuse to finance people who have fines. The bill, as introduced, provides that if an enforcement officer serves a person with a drive license stop order, the person must immediately surrender his or her drive license to the enforcement officer. At the Law and Order Select Committee, we received 15 submissions from individuals, organizations, and other parties. More than half of the submissions expressed support for parts of the bill. Some submissions supported the intent of the bill, but would like to see the court go further in supporting the resolution of debts and encouraging financial literacy. Some of the general submissions expressed concerns about the fairness and impacts on poor and vulnerable people of the current and proposed fines and civil debt enforcement mechanisms. Some of the issues raised at the Law and Order Select Committee are worth noting. The Privacy Commissioner is particularly concerned about the release of government-held personal information to private sector credit reporters and the shift in the use of personal information that this signifies. The Commissioner recommends that the relevant clause 69 removed from the bill. License suspension is another issue on which we spent a considerable amount of time deliberating. Our current collection measures focus largely on seizing goods which can be sold to resolve fines and reparation. Internationally, license suspension is widely used as a fixed-term penalty for traffic offences and as a variable length fine compliance measure. Queensland Transport reports a 75% success rate in collecting fines after threatening or imposing license suspension. There are four further differences between Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, first of all, there is a statutory obligation to promptly update address information on the driver license register. And secondly, third-party bodily insurance is compulsory. And thirdly, deemed service by post for all driver license suspensions. I think New Zealand can learn a great deal from this experience. And fourthly, the onus on people who owe fines to find out if their license have been suspended rather than the state authorities having to prove service. By comparison, in New Zealand, there is no statutory obligation to ensure address information on the driver license register is always up to date. The accident compensation scheme precludes third-party compulsory bodily insurance. Attachments orders, or another issue we looked at closely at the Law and Order Select Committee. Attachment orders are used to allow deductions to be made from wages and benefits to pay debts. At present, attachment orders can be imposed only after an examination, hearing to assess the judgment debtor's ability to pay the debt. Both parties are required to attend the hearing, which can be inconvenient and incur delays and further costs. Some ideas were also floated at the Select Committee as to how the way service can be improved or using alternative methods deemed to have occurred. Service by post is certainly one effective way for us to look at, but what about some new methods such as emails or messages via cell phone or Facebook? Mr. Speaker, given the large and growing amount of outstanding penalties, the effectiveness of monetary penalties as a sanction for offending is being eroded. The threat of credit reporting, together with other measures proposed in the bill, will provide people with a stronger incentive to voluntarily resolve them. There is another problem with the existing regime. Currently, there are 80 plus issuing authorities, and this undoubtedly impedes the collection of fines. Labour proposed to create a single agency to have responsibility for fines. It is regrettable that this provision is missing in this bill. I look forward to the bill's third reading. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker.